name is Nancy Roe Pimm. I wrote this book, The Jerrie Mock Story, and after writing it, Jerrie Mock became my hero. And I hope that after reading it, she will become yours. I'm just going to introduce you to Jerrie a little bit with the author's note to begin with. One evening, while watching local news, a story caught my attention. The news story celebrated the 50th anniversary of the first woman to fly solo around the world. Jerrie Mock had flown in an 11-year-old Cessna 180, and landed 29 days later at the hometown airport of Columbus, Ohio. The flying housewife had a compass, a map, and a system of dots and dashes to circumnavigate the globe. The longest leg of her flight took 17 hours, and at one time she had to stay awake for 30 hours. A war was going on. She flew over shark-infested waters. She landed in and took off from foreign countries with many different cultures and beliefs. Incredible, I thought. How brave. I always thought Amelia Earhart was the first woman to fly around the world. And as I started asking around, I found that most folks think so. Not many have heard Jerrie Mock. In 1964, the year that Jerrie made her historic flight, the Beatles had come to America on the Ed Sullivan Show. The Civil Rights Act had just passed. The United States had entered the war in Vietnam. The US and the USSR were in a space race, so there were many headlines competing. When Jerrie arrived home, she received a hero's welcome. Her story appeared on the front page of the newspaper. She received numerous awards and recognition at a high level. She even went to the Rose Garden with President Johnson. So why and how had Jerrie Mock been forgotten? Why is she not even in the Aviation Hall of Fame in Dayton, Ohio? Why didn't she have a prominent place in the history books? Why hadn't anyone ever heard of her? When I was researching this book, I could not find Jerrie Mock in any books. But I couldn't get her story out of my head, so I picked up the phone and I gave her a call. Airplanes were made to be flown, she said matter-of-factly. You just got to use common sense, point them in the right direction, and be sure to have plenty of gasoline. The hardest part was the planning. The flying was easy. I told her she was brave and daring, and she laughed. I was just having a little fun in my plane, she said. I tried to convince her it was much more than that. I told her I would be honored to write her biography. I loved her story. An inspirational tale about believing in childhood dreams. Jerrie was only 7 years old when she first had this dream to be a pilot. Her dad had taken her to a fair, and they hopped aboard a tri-motor, and she looked up her daddy and said, Daddy, when I grow up, I'm going to be a pilot. Because he just patted her on the head and said, yes, dear. But she never gave up on that dream. And when she was in middle school, she would tell her friends that she wanted to be a pilot, and some of them would be like, I want to be an actress. And one said, I'm going to be a housewife and have lots of kids. And Jerrie said, I'm going to be a pilot and fly around the world. But what happened is as she got older, people told her girls couldn't do things, and she believed in the lie. And she ended up getting married and raising a family until one day she didn't. But I love talking about childhood dreams. It's something I talk about when I visit schools as an author visit. Because what's life without dreams? And what's better than making dreams come true? And Jerrie not only made her dream come true, she told me that when I came to visit 2 weeks earlier, Shasta Ways stopped by, and Shasta is an Afghan refugee who also dreamed of being a pilot. And she was told that girls couldn't do this either. Well, she wasn't going to take no for an answer either, so she went and visited Jerrie Mock. And Jerrie gave her lots of good advice about airports and flying around the country and all different things about the route, not to go around the equator in the middle, and because there's too many uprisings and the weather's bad. So she gave her lots of advice on the route and all kinds of things. And Shasta gives Jerrie a lot of the credit. Jerrie's her mentor, and Shasta finished her trip in October 2017. And I'm actually just finished writing her book. It's a picture book coming out in September called Fly Girl Fly, Shasta Ways Soars Around the World. So I love this book because Amelia Earhart inspired Jerrie to try, because Amelia was Jerrie's hero. And then Jerrie Mock inspired Shasta Ways. And Shasta Ways plans, well, she is inspiring others to this day. So Jerrie had a quote. It says, soon after completing her flight, Jerrie was quoted as saying, I hope that somewhere, here and there, my just doing something that hadn't been done will encourage someone else who wants to do something very much and hadn't quite had the heart to try it. With these words and Jerrie's life story to back them up, Jerrie reminds us that even ordinary people can do extraordinary things. So work hard, put your heart into it, and follow your dreams. So I started with this book, chapter 1, where she's at the airport, Port Columbus, and she's about to take off. So it's March 19th, 1964. But the backstory in this was when she was planning to fly around the world, she had no idea another woman was planning the same thing. And so she found out right before she left that Joe Marion Smith was leaving from Oakland, California, and she wanted to be the first person to fly around the world. So Jerrie was leaving 2 days later. So it became a race between these two women. No one would have ever believed that Jerrie Mock had a big day ahead of her. The 38-year-old woman straightened the house, packed a suitcase, and ran some errands. According to the Columbus Dispatch, the petite Bexley housewife and mother went matter-of-factly about her business on the day before, and like any woman about to take a trip, she had an appointment at the beauty parlor. The next day, she would leave to fly around the world. In 1964, there were very few pilots, no commercial female pilots, and even fewer who dared to fly alone for such a long distance. As Jerrie Mock planned her flight, she discovered that if she succeeded, she would be the first woman to fly around the world solo. When the big day arrived, she finished packing her cramped little airplane, a Cessna 180 she had lovingly nicknamed Charlie. 3 of the 4 seats had been removed, replaced with aluminum gas tanks, converting the single-engine airplane into a long-distance marathon flyer. She squeezed a typewriter onto the pile of maps, a variety of snacks, her suitcase, an oxygen tank, and a bulky life raft. Jerrie planned to write all about her journey and send the reports to the local newspaper. So this picture of the Cessna when it's getting the ferry tanks, the seats are out, tanks are in. Here she is with her husband and 3 children. There's little Valerie, who's 3 years old. The boys are teenagers, and Russ is the husband. There she is in her dining room table, and she's got a Jeppesen flight computer in her hand, and she's planning this trip. It took her 2 years of planning. So I'm going to skip right up here till she's about to take off. Jerrie's family gathered around. Her mother fretted. She had never understood Jerrie's adventuresome spirit, and she always wished her daughter had interest in something more down-to-earth like knitting. Her sister Susan squeezed past a tall newsman and handed Jerrie a cup of hot coffee, while her sister Barb reminded her to collect stamps at every stop for her collection. Her dad told her to be cautious, and he promised to pray for her safe return. Jerrie's mother-in-law Sophie clasped a St. Christopher medal, the patron saint of safe travels, to Jerrie's coat, and she vowed to watch over her family. Dave Blanton, who had developed a plain fuel tank system, gave her last-minute advice. He showed her how to put rags around the opening when filling up the airplane to keep the gas from leaking into the cockpit. He stressed the need for plenty of rags, fresh rags at every stop. Now here's a picture of her mom and dad and her. And there she is in the front page of the paper. Aviatrix takes off. After all the preparations were complete, Jerrie removed her coat to let Blanton and Russ place the cumbersome life jacket around her. The well-wishers and reporters seemed to inch closer and closer. Jerrie stood silently. Her inside shook. Blanton buckled the straps of the life jacket while Russ walked around one last time. Wearing a large straw hat, Jerrie climbed the high step to the cockpit. She adjusted the 2 pillars behind her back and the one underneath. Being only 5 foot tall, she needed the pillars to help her see out the windshield. When Jerrie finally nestled behind the controls in the peaceful cocoon of Charlie, Russ leaned into the cockpit for one last kiss. Jerrie looked over at her 2 sons. They looked worried. Were they afraid that they might never see their mom again? She wished she could get out of a plane and give them one last hug. Her head swirled from all the commotion, making it difficult to concentrate on her checklist. Jerrie reached for the master switch and the starter button on the left side of the panel. The engine rumbled, the propeller sliced through the air. Jerrie trembled with fear, and she kind of wished she could call the whole thing off. But she knew she couldn't do that. So she went through one last checklist and taxied down to the long runway. Jerrie got on the radio and let the controller know she was ready for takeoff. His voice came across the radio, giving her clearance to go. At 9:31 a.m., Jerrie Mock pointed the nose of her aircraft toward the end of the runway at Port Columbus. Alone in her plane, she took a deep breath and pushed in the throttle. Charlie barreled down the airstrip. Fire trucks and cameramen were lined up along both sides of the runway as they rolled past. The roar of the powerful engine thrilled Jerrie as the aircraft's wheels left the ground. The high-set wings of her plane lifted into the air, and she trembled with excitement. Finally, after a lifetime of dreaming, she would see the world. As the plane made its climb heading east, Jerrie heard the tower control say over the radio and the loudspeakers at the airport, "Well, I guess that's the last we'll hear from her." Jerrie Mock couldn't believe her ears. "I'll be back," she thought, "but I hope never to see him again." So I thought that was interesting that this controller would say such a horrible thing. And maybe he said it jokingly, but her family was there, husband or children. But it kind of just got her more determined that she was going to get this job done, which she did. But then after each chapter, I have Did You Know, where I have just little facts, like that Jerrie was not a professional pilot when she took off to fly around the world. She earned her private pilot's license in 1958, and 6 years later, with only 750 hours of flying time behind her, she attempted her historic flight around the world. In order to fly around the world, she needed to get certification to fly her plane using instruments only. She became an instrument-rated pilot before she left the country, but she never had the chance to practice her new skill without an instructor sitting beside her before she left on her around-the-world trip. Then Wiley Post was the first man, and Jerrie Mock was the first woman to fly solo around the world. And by coincidence, both of them also decided to elope when it came time to marry. So just little fun facts at the end. You see Jerrie's house where she grew up, and when she's planning on leaving, and all about every stop: Casablanca, Bermuda, Libya. So you can travel the world with Jerrie Mock. And like I said before, I hope when you're done, she'll be your hero too. Thanks, and have a great day.